Welcome to week 18 of the Bellevue Growcast. I'm here with Pastor Tim. Got Pastor Tim back in here again.
It's good to be back.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed watching all the other guest hosts come in here and be with you guys. It's been neat to see.
Oh, yeah. Be one of many times back. So let's just go ahead and jump right in because both me and Tim are pretty good talkers.
Yeah, we can.
So we need to go ahead and get right to it. First, our highlight is going to be Isaiah chapter 40. And this represents like a break, like a new section starting in Isaiah. It's not talking about Hezekiah anymore. This is a section that is starting off with hope and how, God's glory is going to be revealed to the whole world. God is going to come and reveal his glory to the whole earth. Of course, we know how that ultimately happens in Jesus Christ, but particularly verses 3, you might recognize this if you're an avid New Testament reader. Chapter 40, verse 3 says, "A voice cries, 'In the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God.'" And so you might recall that John writes that in his gospel in John 1:23, and then in Matthew 3, verse 3. John is using this to announce that Jesus is coming. And, John is the forerunner of Jesus. And they ask him, "Are you this Messiah?" And he says, "No, I'm just the one that's preparing the way." And so it's always incredible to see these echoes and these prophecies of Jesus, who is the Messiah, in the Old Testament. And they're everywhere if you look for them. But this is one that's really brought up a lot, and it's brought up in Malachi 3, chapter 3 also. And so I thought it was just a reminder that, yes, we are in the Old Testament, but the whole Old Testament and the whole New Testament, they're always working together in unison, telling the whole grand narrative of God's redemption through Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I like the way the chapter starts, the whole idea of the great comforter. Comfort my people. That's what the children of Israel needed comfort, but the whole world would need comfort. And again, that would only happen through the Messiah. And even though the children of Israel were looking for the restoration of Israel, being restored, this was not just necessarily that they would be a people again, or that God would save them, but this was comfort that Jesus, the great comforter, would bring to all people. So John the Baptist there in he's making that declaration. This is what I'm declaring is the peace and the comfort that is coming behind me.
Yeah, and a lot of times, especially like this text, make straight in the desert the highway for our God. Like, it is talking about Jesus in the future, but it's also talking about the return of the exiles.
Yeah.
So a lot of prophecies in the Old Testament have a multi-layered, several different layers going on, where it's not just talking about Jesus in the future, but it can be several things, like a psalm that's talking about David as the king.
Right.
It could be talking about Jesus as the king at the same exact time.
Right.
And that's how, rich and deep, the scriptures really are. You can never exhaust them.
Yeah.
And then the next part of this, chapter 40, I want to stay in chapter 40, is verses 6 through 8, where it says, "A voice says, 'Cry,' and I said, 'What shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades, when the breath of the Lord blows on it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever.'" And this idea of the forever abiding word, 1 Peter in chapter 1, he cites this when he's talking about the endurance of how the gospel will endure all time. And it's interesting when you think about like the institutions of man, our plans, the things that we make, the institutions that we create, like our governments and all that stuff, and how they will inevitably fade away and not endure. In any of our plans, they'll all die with us, and like one example of this would be like the voting rights bill that was passed in like 1960 something. I don't remember what it was, but it was LBJ passed this voting rights bill that made voting more equitable, it was more equality for voters.
Right.
They've had to re-up that bill. They passed it into law.
Yeah.
But they've had to redo it 5 times because even the most powerful government on the face of the earth, when they pass a law, somehow it doesn't stand forever. They have to re-up it, and they've done it like 5 times. It was just a few years ago they had to re-up this law again, and it's like, God's word is not like that.
Yeah.
It stands forever, and it stands forever, because of what He's given to us. And so, even though our best laid plans in life will die when we die, the word that we preach, the gospel news of Jesus Christ's life, death, and resurrection, it will remain forever. And that is a comforting, piece of good news in a world that's just fading away.
Yeah. And, and it always, we talk about it a lot. It always goes back to our sin nature as well when it comes to why things that we create, whether we write something, whether we draw something, whether we speak something, it's temporary, it's fleshly, it is birthed out of a sin nature. And so, that's why we there's nothing about us that's going to endure forever that is of our own making, our own choosing. And a lot of times that sin nature is what tears so many other things down as well. The word of the Lord will stand forever. Back to the issue or the comment on the voting rights bill, it always has to do with it that people are going to find a way to sabotage whatever it is that is kind of before them because of their sin nature. So, our sin nature causes things to be torn down. But no matter what, as Job said, the plans of the Lord will not be thwarted. What God says stands forever, no matter how sinful we are, and no matter how much the enemy will use us to try to tear down the things of God, they never will be.
And then, it's because God became the Word, incarnate in Jesus Christ.
John 1:1.
Yeah, John 1:1. He became the Word, or the Word became flesh. He got in the trenches with us. I think of the whole movie, like The Band of Brothers. Where he's in the trenches fighting with us, and fighting for us. But it's because he did that, and Christ, who was imperishable, and he put on perishable flesh, so that we who were perishable could put on imperishability and reign with him in heaven forever. And so it's because of what he did in his life and his death and resurrection that he became the forever Word in flesh. That's what redeemed us.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible. All right, let's move to our shadow. And for our shadow, I wanted to hit Leviticus 26. I know I've heard some murmurings of slogging through Leviticus because there's a lot of detailed stuff in there about bodily fluids and all kind of different things, but it's the word of the Lord.
That's right. And
so we need to read it, and there's always something to glean from it. And so Leviticus 26 is a really important chapter in conjunction with Deuteronomy 28. And when we get to Deuteronomy, we'll probably revisit this again. Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28 are the list of blessings and cursings for either obeying the covenant or disobeying the covenant. And you can literally look at everything that happens to Israel from here on out, all through the Old Testament, you can view it through Leviticus 26 or Deuteronomy 28.
Yeah, that's good. And I think one of the things that, like one of the notes I'd written in my study Bible some time ago at 25, right before you get to 26, is, trusting God's process. And, God has been giving, as we've been going through these readings in Leviticus, we've been reading all of these details that you just talked about. And those weren't just arbitrary. It wasn't like God just said, I'll pick some random things to make them do and not do. There was reason. And even though they didn't understand it, and until the scientific age, there were things we didn't even really understand, God was giving those things in detail. And it's because there's a purpose and a meaning behind every one of them for his people to remain holy. And in chapter 25 is the whole Sabbath, keeping the Sabbath day, keeping the Sabbath year, keeping the year of Jubilee after 49 years, 7 sevens. If we would, and if people would, if we would just take care of the land and ourselves, the way that God says, just in that chapter, the blessings that we could endure as people and that the earth would reap as well, because there's a process, there's a plan there. And then he moves into 26 and he begins to talk about, not following, here's what I'll do. If you will obey, all these things will come to fruition. But if you continue to resist and reject me, eventually, essentially what he's telling them at the end of 26, or by the time we get to the end of 26 is, I know it's a long way down the line, but I'll take you into captivity. I will destroy this land, and I'll destroy your city and your temple and your buildings and take you into captivity. So it's amazing how he's already, hinting at that here in Leviticus 26.
Yeah, and I mean, these two chapters, Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, almost said Deuteromans, and you can't overlook them because of how important they are.
Yeah.
And, the blessings of obeying the covenant, from Exodus 34 and Exodus, the original covenant with Moses and Israel, the blessings of it is land, protection, peace, all these different blessings. But the cursings are the opposite of that, is captivity and, plagues and all these, horrible things that we see happen to Israel because of their disobedience. And so just wanted to shine a little light on that shadow of, just how important these two chapters are, because you can be about anywhere in the Old Testament, like, in Hosea or in, Isaiah or in Ezekiel, and you can see, where Israel is in the story, and you can see that, it was their disobedience.
Right.
That's how they got here. That's why God is doing this to them, and that's why God's using Babylon to punish them. It's because he said he was way back there. So, all right, let's do our last application. I believe you have that for us.
Yeah, application out of Psalm 78. There is this psalm is pretty lengthy, but it's a unique psalm because what the psalmist is doing is taking the reader through the nation of Israel's history, including what we've been talking about, that they would eventually reject God, turn away from God, they would go into captivity. But one of the things that I think happens early in the psalm that I think is something that we need to take to heart in our own lives is the encouragement that the psalmist gives there in verse 4. We must not hide them. We must not keep from them, essentially, the things that God has done for us in the past. So often people fail to remind the generations to come the faithfulness of God in the past. And he goes on to say that at that future generation of children yet to be born might know, that the future generations yet to be born might know. We know that there were several times in Israel's history when they would set up stone markers, as they were coming out of the Jordan. They took the 12 stones, they set them on the shore, and it was, why are we putting those there? So that in the future we can tell our children that God had brought us, into the land, and that we crossed this very river. It dried up, and we crossed it. And a lot of times, it's not that we forget, but it's that we are so inundated with the new culture that we're in. They were moving into the land of Canaan, this land that they were told don't practice the way that they practice. God has given you every territory that you're going to step on. He's going to defeat every enemy that's before you. So don't practice as they practice. Continue to follow the Lord's instructions. And so in our lives, we move further and further down the timeline of history or future. And sometimes we get so caught up in the enemies in front of us and the territory we're trying to claim for ourselves that we forget to remind ourselves and our children and future children the faithfulness and the goodness of God. And the psalmist is really just trying to push that home here in the early portion of this. I think for my sake, I know that it's something that I say probably a lot, and I reference it quite a good bit, is that, somebody's got to be willing to break the cycle. And if we as generations continue to just move forward without God, move forward neglecting God, move forward forgetting God, there's going to come a generation that's not going to know God. And so we've got to be willing to say, as the generations have proceeded, it seems like we're removing ourselves further and further from God, or moving God further and further out of our every area of our life. And, there's great danger in that, because if you remove God out of a portion of your life, I mean, the Bible, even Jesus indicates that the whole, demon leaving the vessel and then going and not finding anywhere else to reside, and then coming back to the vessel and taking over with a vengeance, like bringing more severe, stronger, demon possession into that vessel. And so if we aren't allowing God to be in our homes or in our churches or in our marriages or in our government or in our schools, well, spiritual warfare says the enemy's going to come and fill that void.
Yeah.
And so it's important that we say enough's enough. We need to be reminded. We need to be reminding the generations coming behind us of who God is and how faithful He is. And it's why I believe the church is so important, is that, who else is going to continue to share the gospel and be the light of the world if we cease reminding people how good and faithful God is and what He's done for us through Jesus. Then the destruction of God's people, as this flushed out, the history of the nation is that they would eventually be destroyed and go into captivity. And so I think it's important that we are continually reminding and teaching and lifting up the gospel and lifting up Jesus, because I don't want it to happen on our watch, that the generation comes that doesn't know Christ or doesn't hear of Him.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know where it is, but there's that one verse that's like, Christ won't come back again until all have heard. And so, like, it can look, especially with the 24-hour news cycle, and you're just constantly bombarded with, like, the things in the world are so bad.
Right.
It can look really dark and bleak, but, we've been given a mission as the church, and that's to preach Christ and to preach this enduring word that will last and stand forever, even in a world that's fading away, and that's fallen and that's broken and needs that enduring word of Christ.
Yeah. Paul encourages us, do not grow weary in doing good. It is easy to grow weary because it seems like, the world we live in is so bleak and so dark. But again, at the end of the day, the word of the Lord stands forever, and He will make good on the promises that He has given us in Scripture. And so, that can give us that encouragement to just keep on, because the enemy's going to do everything he can to keep us from sharing the gospel.
Yeah, that's a good place to end right there on the promises of God.
There you go.
Yeah, standing firm. So, all right. Well, we will see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us, and keep on reading.